UFC fighters become instant global superstars, but the stakes are high and it's as real as it gets. Guys walk into that octagon with everything on the line, and sure enough, we get to see careers ending due to injuries. But sometimes, fighters just get unlucky, and bad health conditions put an end to their run in the UFC. No one is safe, not even big superstars like T.J Dillashaw. Let's dive in. First up, his injury-plagued career. Dillashaw is one of the all-time greats of the bantamweight division, and no one can deny that. Now, don't get us wrong, we know the two-time champ did a lot to damage his legacy, but guys, the man was a force of nature. He just had one huge problem: injuries. The man was more injury-prone than most athletes in any sport. We mean he literally fought 3 times between 2019 and 2022, and even though a suspension had a part to play in that, the guy was having surgeries the whole time, tearing tendons and ruining joints. Yeah, those are the kind of injuries that have plagued TJ's career since the beginning. And honestly, guys, it might even explain the PED use. The guy's body just couldn't keep up under natural conditions. His fights were being canceled due to injury as early as UFC 186 in 2015, where he was supposed to fight another bantamweight legend, Renan Barão. Yeah, this was going to be a huge event, a rematch after Dillashaw's upset win against Barão in 2014. Unfortunately, it was all downhill from there, guys. Even though the ex-champ recovered and fought again, his body has been on a constant decline. Just look at how his last fight against Aljo went. Following up, his last fight before retirement. It's no surprise, given everything we've talked about, that the bantamweight superstar decided to retire after another injury. We mentioned how his career had been plagued by injuries for a long time, but the last 3 years have been particularly horrible for the American mixed martial artist. That's right, from 2019 to 2022, TJ had surgery on both of his shoulders, and this would continue to give him trouble as he went into his camp for UFC 280. The man's shoulder was so severely injured that, according to Cub Swanson, Lieutenant Dan couldn't even lift his arm during training. That's horrifying, guys, and it's especially bad when you're in camp months away from fighting a killing machine like Aljamain Sterling. Now, we've got to respect TJ for not pulling out of the fight, but maybe he should have. We mean, the guy's shoulders were just gone. Even during the fight, we all witnessed as the man's shoulder popped out and his corner was popping it back in between rounds 1 and 2. Ouch. Considering just how badly his shoulder was already injured, yeah, it makes sense that we won't be seeing him step into the octagon again. Coming up, TJ retires. The Aljo fight was the final nail in the coffin, and for his own sake, Dillashaw can't keep going. His arms are all but destroyed, and at this point, we doubt even PEDs will help much. You've got to remember, guys, he's 37 years old, at the end of most fighters' shelf lives, and this is the age around which we see guys' bodies falling apart. And we can say for sure, Lieutenant Dan's body is falling apart. As it stands now, despite his PED use and following disgrace in the MMA community, Dillashaw retires as one of the most dominant bantamweights ever, with 2 separate reigns as UFC champ, but ultimately, no fighter can outrun injury. Health issues are the true boogeyman of the sporting world, and there have been many fighters whose careers ended because of unfortunate health complications. Let's take a look at some of them. First up, number 6, David Michaud. You might not remember this one, guys, but Michaud, or Bulldog, was featured on the 16th season of The Ultimate Fighter. Sure, he didn't have a great run on the show, but the guy was crafty. He managed to get a UFC contract anyway in 2014. The biggest MMA promotion in the world is no joke though, and Bulldog was immediately tested, as the first opponent he got was the Leech Jingliang. Yeah, that's not an easy fight. Unfortunately, the guy was destroyed by Lee, and 2 fights later dropped by the UFC. But as we said, he was crafty, and he found his way to Bellator, where he was slated to face an ex-champ. That's what makes this so much more tragic. This could have been his big break, but his health wouldn't allow it. The guy had a bad ticker. Yeah, apparently the guy was born with a bad heart, and he wasn't fit to keep putting his body under so much stress. In a heartbreaking post on Twitter, the fighter explained his condition and retirement to the fans. It's unfortunate for sure, but we're glad Davis was able to retire and prioritize his health. Coming up, number 5, Dan Hardy. The outlaw Dan Hardy was one of the biggest names in the fight game, and the UK superstar was trained in a whole host of different martial arts. His biggest fight was the title fight against GSP in 2010. Remember, guys, you have to be the best in the division to get a title fight. This man was the real deal. Once again, his record and story just make his retirement all the more tragic. We were supposed to see the Outlaw versus Matt Brown in 2013, and you best believe we were all excited. But unfortunately, what we got was a series of heartbreaking tweets from the welterweight. He revealed that he had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition, and considering how MMA fighters' bodies need to be under constant stress, it was no surprise surprised that the California State Commission declared him unfit to fight. And just like that, the star UK fighter retired from the sport. Now, don't get us wrong, he was 38, and that is around the time most fighters start leaving the game, but he had a lot more in him if only his heart had stayed healthy. Next up, number 4, Forrest Griffin. This man needs no introduction. Forrest Griffin isn't just a UFC legend, but one of the first ever, and his fight with Stephen Bonner is what got the ball rolling for Dana White's UFC. It makes sense that this guy was inducted into the Hall of Fame, but hey, even if that didn't happen, his legacy is undeniable. Now, this guy was a beast, and he was tearing through the UFC in the early days. But even if you remember none of that, you'll remember his trilogy against Tito Ortiz. Yep, this man was one exciting fighter. Unfortunately, declining health is an occupational hazard for fighters, and their bodies start falling apart at one point or another. Yeah, just like what happened with T.J. Dillashaw. Anyway, as this absolute specimen of a fighter got into his career, the injuries started catching up with him, and he took a real hit to his health when he suffered an ACL tear and an MCL strain in 2012. The man had also been suffering from a bad arm for a few years, and this last injury was the straw that broke the camel's back. The ex-champ's physical health wouldn't allow him to compete any longer, and he retired as an all-time great. Following up, number 3, Bas Rutten. Speaking of legends, this is another all-time great and UFC Hall of Famer. The guy is an ex-heavyweight champ, and when he was fighting, he was nothing but dominant. It seemed like no one could stop him, and the only reason he lost the heavyweight belt was because he vacated the title on purpose. The guy vacated the title to move to another weight class and conquer it. Unfortunately, the unstoppable Bas didn't need an opponent to defeat him. He was put out of commission by bad luck and poor health conditions. After his move down to light heavyweight, the mixed martial artist suffered injury after injury. And we aren't exaggerating, guys. The man blew out his knee, suffered a neck injury, and tore his biceps. Ouch! The situation was so horrible that this beast of a man could not bicep curl 5 pounds. That's nothing. And for a guy whose entire life was built around physical strength, not to be able to curl that much, yeah, you can bet his physical health was compromised. Unsurprisingly, Rutten never fought again after his health took a nosedive, but once again, like Griffin, he retired an all-time great. Coming up, number 2, Michael Bisping. The Count was one of the most exciting fighters ever, and he was one of the craziest stories in the UFC. The guy was fighting in the same era as GSP, where most fighters were on the juice. You better believe it was dangerous for natural fighters to step into the ring with some of those performance-enhanced beasts. Bisping wasn't scared though, and he took on an enhanced Vitor Belfort. Unfortunately, it didn't go so well. The guy got cracked in the head with a devastating kick, and his optic nerve ripped off of his retina, leaving him blind in one eye. Yeah, this was a huge hit to his physical health for sure, and he was no longer fit to fight. He kept it secret and fought anyway, but that's just because he was savage. Seeing how amazing he was with just one eye, we can't help but think about what he could have done if he had been able to maintain his health. Unfortunately though, that's not how it worked out, and Bisping eventually retired on account of health concerns. And we don't blame him. We mean, the guy became a champ. We're glad he walked away with his other eye intact. Finally, number 1, Stefan Struve. The UFC skyscrapers fights got a lot of attention, and it makes sense. We mean, the guy was the tallest fighter on the roster, and who doesn't want to watch a 7-foot giant fight? Unfortunately, the true boogeyman of the fight game, health conditions, caught up with Struve. The guy suffered for a while with inner ear issues, and we all know there's no fighting without balance, especially when you're 7 feet tall. It all came to a head for the giant in 2020 when he fought against Tuivasa. The Aussie fighter landed a deadly punch to Struve's ear and aggravated his injury. And as you can probably guess, it wasn't good. The Dutch fighter announced his retirement and stated that his inner ear issues had gotten so bad that he couldn't put his body through the stress required to train for competitive MMA. That's it for this one, guys. Do you want more MMA-based content? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and we'll see you in the next one.